Welcome to the Real Triathlon Podcast. I'm your host, Garrick Lowen, here with Nicholas Chase and Jackson Laundry.
Welcome back to the Real Triathlon Podcast, another edition with Fuelin's own CEO, Scott Tindal, and co-founder. So thanks for coming on board. I know you're about to head to, is it Taupo? What do you say? Where are you going?
Well, firstly, I'm not the CEO. Jonathan might get really upset. He's the CEO.
I'm sorry, man.
No,
Sorry, Jonathan. My bad.
No, that's cool. I have no intention of being a CEO. It sounds like a terrible role. So I'm happy just to take the co-founder and Chief Nutrition Officer. It's the made-up title that I gave myself. So, but mate, great to be back. I pronounce it Taupo, but probably every Kiwi out there is probably absolutely cussing me right now for mispronunciation. So, but excited to get there. Fly in tomorrow. We have a live Q&A with Kyle Smith, which is going to be for athletes of Fuelin, and we'll probably do it with select partner as well with Precision Hydration, and then we're going to throw it out to some of their athletes as well to come and listen to myself and Kyle talk everything about fueling, hydration, his preparation, his year. I think he's had a pretty stellar year. I think he finished second in the T100 rankings, which was really exceptional for him as a wild card as well. And then, look, I'm maybe biased, but I think he'll win on Sunday.
I think everyone wants him to win, no matter who you are. Like, I don't care if you like someone else. You're like, yeah, but Kyle Smith should probably still win.
Yeah, I think it's his hometown. He's got, special purpose. He's pretty pumped for it. It hasn't been all smooth sailing. A bit of sickness here and there after Dubai, but he's raring to go, and I think he'll absolutely smash it out of the park. And then from a female perspective, we have Imogen Simmons in the pro ranks, and I think Imogen's going to shock a few people. I mean, look, last year she came third. She's had a few podium finishes at 70.3s, and she's definitely going to be vying for top spot. And I think, again, might be biased, but I think she'll do exceptionally well.
Well, I think it's no coincidence that some of the most lovely people within the sport tend to do really well. And just because they've got that energy about them, they make the good connections. They just don't let the little things chip away over and over. And that's part of this sport. Like, you have to deal with it and love it and just roll with it, because you're going to get punched like every day.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, actually. I've been really lucky with the pro athletes that I've worked with, and maybe it's just, you can talk about the universe and all that, how people come together, but you tend to attract like people, and will hand on heart say that like Kyle and Imogen are both lovely individuals and extremely easy to work with. And, again, with all the athletes that I've had the opportunity to work with, they all seem to be lovely individuals first and foremost, which I think does translate to somewhere along the line performance, which is really weird. I mean, you can obviously have a dick of an athlete who does very well, but it more often than not tends to be short term and they get forgotten very quickly. So I don't know, karma and all that sort of stuff, I guess, comes a bitch, they say, isn't it?
You're not wrong in all of that, but today's talk specifically is not about karma, even though it's there with us. It's always here. I know it's always great getting on any call with you, just because personally, I'm like, wow, Scott, he's in the back pocket of probably a lot of the biggest and the best in the sport. Even just the majority of us are just probably reaching out to you for like, hey man, I've had this happen. Can you help me? And Scott's probably like, come on, I can't just be fixing everything. It's all unique. It's not like a simple one-liner that I can send you. I've got to type 3 paragraphs, and I got to know your family genetics and lineage to make sure I can give you a time. So I know it's probably a bit overwhelming, but for what you do, Scott, and what your whole team does at Fuelin, I know you're trying to solve some big problems in our endurance sports world, which, I mean, I think it translates to any sport really, but specifically when it comes to human performance, taking the best of it for what we can do on the course and subject ourselves to. Now, when you're heading into these types of races where most everyone is traveling a big distance, and they're kind of going to be throwing their time schedule out of whack, their new food habits, like it's tough to kind of get the same things. Like, what type of advice when it comes to these really big international 20-hour, 12-hour, whatever have you time swings, what type of advice, because the whole ecosystem of eating falls into Fuelin, not just race day. So how do you kind of approach that to give the best case scenario for maybe a couple of these cases? I know this is very general, but I'm sure you'll have a couple nuggets.
No, I think it's actually a very specific question, Nick. I mean, long haul travel, it's one of those questions, isn't it? And I was talking about this with Jan the other day, and I mean, because something we introduced when we started working together was actually this notion of fasting for long haul travel. And um, he was very against it. And he was really like, he said that and the idea of not having coffee after 12 o'clock were nearly the deal breakers for us. And we had to have big talks about it. And he did actually go on and try the whole fasting on long haul flights. And now he is the biggest advocate of it and talks about it to everyone that he meets. And I will preface that and say that the science behind it is pretty loose. Okay, so it's not something that is robust. There's lots of randomized controlled studies and meta-analyses and systematic reviews. There is sort of a hypothesis around it, why it works and how it can maybe improve circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm generally will be impacted by jet lag or by long haul travel across time zones. The thing that can reset your circadian rhythm is generally meal cues or light exposure. So there is also some sort of thinking around that potentially it impacts an inflammatory response by not eating during the period of travel as well. Again, pretty loose, mainly based on rodent studies and things like that.
Well, real quick too, like if you're eating even in a flight, like there's probably not a lot of data to go off of, like when you're in that crazy ecosystem of an airframe with different pressure values, and your gut's going to have a different response, maybe even more sensitive response times or rates with foods in those climates.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, there's certainly higher pressures. There's low humidity. I mean, that can impact dehydration first and foremost. So I think that's something, yes, rate of digestion could be impacted by the pressure of the cabin, which could have an impact on the way you digest the food, as you said. Secondly, the low humidity could impact the hydration status. So drinking water or definitely not drinking alcohol on a flight would be recommended. We've all been there. We've all had the way too many drinks on a long haul flight, and then you can't function. No,
What is
you've
it?
never been there?
No. Actually, I probably haven't. I've never gotten drunk on an airplane because I've seen too many drunk people on an airplane, and I'm scared of being that.
Brutal.
But
Yeah.
what is it? Real quick tangent. What is it about being on an aircraft at 8 a.m. that entices somebody in first class to just order a vodka tonic straight right off the vodka orange juice? Like they just start hammering the drinks at like any hour of the day.
Well, because I've only flown business a couple of times, but I mean, immediately the hostess will come up to you and say, "Tea or coffee or glass of champagne," and you're like, "What sort of champagne are you serving?" And they'll sort of like go, "Oh, it's Bollinger," and you're like, "Oh, yeah, why not?" So I think there is a little bit of enticement there. You're sort of like, "Why not? I'm not going to do this all the time." Certainly, if you're in my position, so it's sort of not novelty factor, I think. But yeah, for the regulars flying, maybe they're just high functioning alcoholics and do it very well. So, so yeah, drinking water on a long haul flight definitely recommend. Back to the fasting. So it can be a deal breaker. Some athletes think that I'm like, you have to fast on a long haul flight. No, you don't. My experience personally and with athletes, whether they're professional athletes or age groupers or just want to try something different and they suffer from jet lag, yeah, it's something I would certainly recommend that you eat up until your flight. You certainly set your time to destination on your watch so you understand what time it is in the day that you're getting on the plane where you're heading to, and then effectively fast on that plane, so that you're not consuming any food. As Jan and I joked about as well, maybe it's just not eating plain food that actually is the biggest benefit of the whole thing, knowing that plain food probably isn't of the highest quality, because it's all prepackaged and sort of stuck there for months and months. So look, it's one of those things. Yeah, it works for some, doesn't work for others. It's not that hard. I mean, a few hours, like even if it's 10, 12 hours, it's
Okay.
not really that much different.
I was going to ask what you felt in terms of long haul was really worth the fast. What it's like 6, 8 hours, something like that.
Yeah, sort of crossing over probably time zones, considerable amount of time zones, and probably even, from northern to southern hemisphere, that sort of thing, then you're certainly going to benefit from it.
Have
But
you
if you're, if you're crossing probably, significant time zones and duration on the plane is probably at least 6 or 8 hours, then I would suggest that you try that.
First off, if I am in first class and I'm on a long haul flight, I'm eating because that meal is actually
Well,
good. I'm
I
getting green
know.
beans and mushrooms and some steak.
So this is the conundrum. If I'm talking to, say, a one-to-one client or a professional athlete, they might be flying business and they might be flying first class, and they're like, "What? You don't want me to eat that? Like, I don't get to, it's great." But you sort of weigh it up. Look, again, if it's one of those perks and you're there and you're doing that all the time, again, you're not gonna die wondering if you didn't eat that plain food once, and it significantly impacts your jet lag at your destination, allows you to have a better holiday or a better race. I would argue that that time not eating, focusing on getting your sleep in line with your destination or staying awake in line with your destination is going to be far more powerful to start to reset that circadian rhythm.
Perfect. And 2 points to that. I think if you are lucky enough to pay the exorbitant amount of money or get business upgrades through your routes, being able to just lay down, being horizontal instead of just being uncomfortably sat with everything locked up from the gut, from the legs, from all those vascular areas just getting slowed down. I feel like if you can lay down, you're like, because I have had poor man's first class a few times, even from a Beijing to LA flight, like 16 hours or something like that. I laid down across 3 seats. It was beautiful. And I woke up and I felt like I was the same person.
Game changer. Honestly, like if you were heading to Taupo for the race and the race was really important and you felt like, this is an opportunity for me to really lay it down and potentially, place as high as I can, I would argue that yes, that money spent on extra leg room and the ability to lay flat is probably going to significantly impact the way in which you can prepare for that race. But
Absolutely.
it's expensive. It's not for everyone. It's again personalized based on your purpose and your position.
I know that most of the one percenters pro athletes, I think that they negotiate some of those in with their contracts of like, if I'm going to this race for this specific championship,
For
we're all going
sure.
to pony up and get me there in first class. So that's great. I love it.
Yeah,
Use that
yeah, and look,
leverage.
I think use that, and I think certainly from a professional athlete standpoint, I think negotiating that into contracts would completely make sense, especially learning around like the top 20 athletes in the T100, they all do pretty well financially, and you want to be targeting the top 20 for next year for 2025 to guarantee that cash prize. Yeah, I'd be certainly thinking about little those, and they're not one percenters. I'd definitely put them above the 1% sort of mark.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
I
the
think they
point
can make
eight percenters.
they can, yeah, well, no, I'm saying the other way. I think they're far more important than 1%. People talk about carbon water bottle holders and stuff like that. And,
Yeah.
I know we're going to talk about nutrition and more maybe some of the things around off season, but I'd put those things far higher than, some of the other things like, the magic supplement that you might be thinking of taking and so on.
Ooh. Yeah. We're going to get into a few magic supplements, maybe not too deep, but we'll just have a couple
Yeah, yeah.
jabs. And one more thing on travel. I've used one or two times for long haul flights, like a jet lag system or an app that kind of gets me 3 or 4 days out from the race. It kind of suggests bedtimes, wake times, daylight times, even some yoga, caffeine times, melatonin times. And I've found like to help my gut get, because the biggest thing I noticed after I travel is like I'm super regular at home no matter what. Every day, it's like oh, there's the bell. I'm going. Okay. So every time I know. But then sometimes after travel, that's like even like I'm on the same time zone at home, like that, it triggers me at like 8 p.m. or whatever in Germany. But eventually it happens faster and it's much easier and I think fasting too, like I've probably done that maybe by accident a few times. And I can remember since you've said that, like I woke up the next day in that country being able to just have no issue going to the bathroom immediately on my same schedule. So I think the dehydration, the guts kind of get stuck when you're sitting and flying. And like when you're eating food on top of it, it just kind of compounds. Nothing's going anywhere. So I think that's probably the best reason for the fasting is like you're just giving yourself a fresh start in country.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, you think about it though. Yeah, I mean, you're sitting on your ass for, let's say, 16 hours. Like, it just doesn't make sense in my head now that you don't need those calories, and those calories are going to be pretty poor quality anyway, as I said, at best. And so it's like you eat out of boredom. That is why you eat on a plane. You are bored. So you just are like, yeah, I'll eat the pretzels, I'll eat the terrible biscuits that they give you and drink everything else and eat the food. And it's just mindless. If you actually look around when the food is served, and they won't even serve the food at the time of a regular lunch, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, it's just random.
It's like
You look
20 minutes
around,
after takeoff. You're like, holy, we're eating dinner already. It's
yeah,
3 o'clock.
yeah, and then you're looking at your watch where it's destination, and you're like, hold on, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon where I'm heading, or it's 9 o'clock in the morning or something, and now I'm getting served something that doesn't relate to where I'm going. It's funny. You look around and it's literally like a feeding lot. Like it always reminds me of cattle in a
It
feeding lot.
is.
They're just got their head down and just eating, and you're like, oh, I just don't need to do this.
You know, a hack that I've always used is I always request a gluten-free meal on my airline ticket because guess what? They
Or the
bring that
vegetarian.
they bring that shit out
Yeah,
first. They bring it out
yeah,
first. And everyone else has to wait like an hour. And you're just like,
yeah.
I'm gonna eat. Sorry, I'm gonna eat. It's so fast.
Yeah, it's a really good hack. Either request the gluten-free or the vegetarian meal because it will be made specifically for you as well. So
Yeah.
it's a nice little thing. Or you can request a high protein meal now, which is actually quite
Yeah.
good as well. If
See,
you want to eat on them, that is.
but these little things make a big difference. I'm telling you, this is good data right here.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So travel, obviously it's tough. Getting around the country, keeping your immune system high, and you've spent so much time getting ready for it. So I think the fasting aspect, there's got to be some good merit to it, just based off of like bro science that we can just kind of agree on. Um,
Yeah, I
um,
think, look, as I said, the data is not robust on it. There's certainly some hypotheses floating around why. Hopefully, more research will come out. Anecdotally, it works. As I always say, lack of evidence isn't always evidence of lack of effect. If it works for you and you feel better with it, then I would go for it. So,
and then once you land and you're getting settled, like it's back to the ecosystem of carb, doing all the stuff that you would do for race week that you would probably do for any race. I mean, I think we, as
correct.
pro athletes, we pretty much try to standardize a lot of the week eating before the race, whether it's just I know I don't want to eat ice cream. I know because that might, upset my stomach. For me, I'm never going to touch a piece of corn ever during race week. That's a bad idea for me. But everything else, I think you can just figure it out. And then I think what athletes I know are struggling with a lot is the amount of calories. Like, do you have this problem with athletes saying, I can't eat breakfast. I get nauseous. So I'm like, can you eat breakfast though? Like, is this something you just sort of
On
like, no,
race day or leading
in
up?
every day when I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, you need to have a meal before this, or you need to have a slight snack before this run of 2 hours. Like, I just can't, I get nauseous. Like, have you encountered these types of athletes and have you been able to address any of this for the better?
Well, if there was a true can't, then I would be suggesting they go and see a medical professional and go and have a scope or something like that to find out what the medical reason is why they can't actually eat a snack or a meal. The reality is they're like saying, oh, it maybe causes a little bit of distress, a little bit of uncomfortable sort of feeling, and therefore they don't want to do that because they don't want to have that, and therefore they're not actually training their gut to start to adapt. So, yes, it sucks, as I'll repeatedly say the first time you squat in the gym, your legs get really sore and it's really uncomfortable. And if you said, I never want to do that again because it made me uncomfortable, well, you know what? You're never going to get stronger. You go back for more, and next time you do it, it doesn't hurt as much. And the next time you've actually got to add more weight to in order to get that, painful stimulus, which is actually that adaptive process. The gut's no different. Start with a small snack. Might be half a piece of toast, dry toast with a little bit of butter on it. Okay. You got 6 grams of, carbs in, you got like 2 grams of protein and probably zero fat. Great. At least you got something in. How'd you feel? Oh, it was all right. Let's do it again next time. Oh, it was fine. I didn't even notice it. Okay, let's eat a piece of toast next time. Maybe we add a teaspoon of jam to that or jelly. Oh, how was that? Oh, yeah, it came up a little bit, but it was all right. I got through it. Next time, do the same thing again. How was it? Oh, it was fine. Didn't even notice it. okay, let's add a tablespoon of jelly this time. And it's just progressive. It's just progressive overload. It's no different from weights training. It's no different from riding a bike, running. You're just adding distance. You're either adding distance or adding intensity, and food is the same. You're adding in volume
And
and
at the end of the
density.
day, you're going to be eating 3 pancakes, some bacon, and you're going to be fine.
Yeah, and then that's the thing. And then they expect to go to a race and go, okay, now I've got to eat all this food. And in the race, I'm going to like smash 100 grams of carbs an hour. I know we're going to talk about my bugbear there, but it's like, don't expect to do something that you've never done before. Like, it's like going and doing an Ironman and go, gee, I've never swum 3.9 Ks and I've never ridden 180 Ks and I've never run a marathon. But you know what? I'm just going to go and do an Ironman. There's probably some freaks out there who can do that, but majority, you know what? It's not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd like to challenge all those athletes too, because I had this conversation like tonight at dinner. I'm visiting some athletes that I coach in a group in Cincinnati, and the amount of people who said I just can't eat breakfast. I'm like, I think you can eat breakfast, but you're just telling yourself you can't eat breakfast, and so that's tricking your mind and body into making you feel even more like when you think about it, like it's just get some food in you.
Well, that's NLP, neuro linguistic programming. So
Yes.
as soon as you say you can't do anything, there is science around this. Again, don't quote me on studies and things, but as soon as you say you can't, it is interfering with the way in which the brain works and actually is making things harder to do. So again, if you're a positive half glass full person, like it can become easier to actually achieve the things that trying to do because you're actually telling yourself, oh, I can do this. And so it's like, as soon as you say, it's like okay, again, if you come back to, I'm in a weightlifting phase at the moment, and it's like, if you tell yourself you can't lift that, chances are you're probably not going to lift it. But if you say to yourself, yeah, I'm going to bang this out, like you'll probably get it done. And you know what? If there's someone cheering you on the sideline, you'll definitely get it done. And it's like, just, either be your own hero or find someone to sit at the kitchen table with and they can be your hero and tell you you can eat that piece of toast or you can eat those pancakes before the run. And I can guarantee you can actually do it. That notion of can't, yeah.
It's tough. I want to I get like fired up. I'm like, oh, tell me you can't. I'll tell you 30 reasons right now why you're it up for yourself. You can.
Yeah. Look, just to be clear, there may be a medical reason. And again, there could be a psychological reason for that individual to not do it. What we're talking about here is excluding those two categories.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're talking about the individual who just, oh, I can't eat something before a run. That would be terrible. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, it's actually all right. You can do it. And then once they start doing it, they're like, actually, that wasn't bad. And I felt pretty awesome during the session. And gee, I felt way better afterwards. I didn't get like, I wasn't ravished afterwards, or I didn't have as much soreness, or I recovered really quickly. And it's like, okay, now you're starting to learn.
Absolutely. Barring the mental and physical effects of an eating disorder or a medical disorder, of course,
Correct.
we're speaking in those terms.
Correct.
So, athletes who are, do you have athletes who are still struggling to wake up and ingest 120 or whatever grams of carbs for breakfast before a race? And are they starting to, like, what foods are you finding the least problems with versus the most problems with? Like, those are good extremes to kind of plug in.
Yeah, and I think just look, again, you talk about numbers, 120 grams and things, and I guess this relates to in-session fueling as well. I think a lot of people are confused around how much they should be consuming because they hear these huge numbers by pro athletes consuming them, especially around grams per hour. It's really going to depend on the individual. As a basic rule, probably before a long distance race, something that's creeping up 90 minutes or more, you're probably aiming for somewhere around that 2 grams per kilo body weight for carbohydrates, trying to get that in. So, if you're a 50 kilo athlete, what's that, 110 pounds? Yeah. You're probably aiming for around 110 grams of carbs. That would be the top end, maybe, for someone who's starting off. You can certainly, we have athletes consuming anywhere from 2 to 4 grams per kilo of body weight because they're just very good eaters and they can cope with that. And also their energy output. If I think of someone like Kyle and Imogen, they're obviously going to be trying to eat more because their energy expenditure is going to be so much higher, even though it's over a much shorter period of time. So it's balancing that out as well. They're going to be finishing. I mean, Kyle will probably finish in what, 3 hours? I don't know,
They
3:20
might go
maybe.
3:30 at this course. I don't know. It depends on the
Yeah,
weather.
somewhere between 3:20, 3:30, I think is for the target. And it's like, I mean, that's quick, man. Like, so they're not out there as long, but their energy expenditure during that time is much higher. It could be 2 times as high in per hour as, an average age grouper. So you have to fuel that accordingly as well. Now, for the age group who's not producing as much power per hour, but is going to be out there for another 2 hours, okay, you got to factor that in as well. So that's just more how they need to have enough fuel on them to, fuel those extra hours. And that probably comes down to practicalities of carrying the fuel or collecting it on course.
Exactly. So it's not some set number or volume. It's going to be depending upon, obviously, we put out watts, which is a measure of heat and calorie expenditure. So you can do some rough number crunching, and TSS is based off of that pretty much within Training Peaks. So there's ways
I learned that the other day. I was actually at a TPU event. It was fantastic. And I learned that the TSS is based on normalized power, actually, which I was like, oh, that's awesome. But it's funny you say that about the bikes. And it's actually, I mean, hence why you're a very good coach. But I was struck by some coaches who didn't understand that watts actually equated to energy expenditure the other day. And I was like, but what do you mean? And they were sort of asking why athletes couldn't consume huge amounts of carbs. And I was like, yeah, but they're only producing 130 watts normalized power. And therefore, total energy expenditure is really low. And there was sort of this disconnect between watts and energy expenditure. And so I think it's like, hopefully everyone's coming onto that. But if you're not aware of that, I would certainly say maybe upskill yourself with what those numbers mean and how they then relate to fuel intake, because that's going to dictate your athlete's intake of fuel as much, because you're not going to try. I mean, look, for a very low power output, you probably could consume enough calories per hour to actually bring it into sort of an isocaloric state or like meet those energy requirements. But more often than not, you'll never consume the amount of calories per hour that actually matches the expenditure.
Well, even if you consume it, you can't process and utilize it that quickly anyways.
Probably not. So it's like, I always say, like, if you're consuming 120 grams of carbs, but you're expending 1,000 calories an hour, you're still way off. And that's when things like your carbohydrate load and your glycogen stores, liver, muscle, blood is going to be really important to probably allow you to, get through that race. And then endogenous stores of fat are also going to fuel that performance. And you're still going to use huge amounts of fat after a period of time, even if you're taking in huge amounts of carbs.
And energy sources are always varying, and like the concentration of the gut within all those. And for me, that's always been the hardest problem during an Ironman distance race is like, you can kind of fake most things through a 70.3 now. And like, I will even take 4 gels on most 70.3 run courses and take almost 0 sips of water with them and be totally fine. But if I try that over an Ironman, like, I am not digesting anymore. Everything has stopped after like 3 hours or 2 hours of running. So,
and that may relate to hydration status as much as anything, because like if you look at some of Alan's study, Dr. Alan McCubbin, who works with us at Fuelin, they looked at some stuff where they did continuous running on a treadmill, brutal, like 5 hours continuous running at 30 degrees Celsius. Like, they managed to recruit 9 people. You can imagine why. It was, you can't recruit people for something like that.
Did they get a lifetime supply of something after that? Like,
I don't know I haven't found out what the compensation was for that study.
But good.
What they showed was that, specific amounts of sodium up to that amount probably didn't impact things like intake of fluid, ad libitum intake of fluid, total water balance, things like that. Net loss of sodium, was higher in the group that didn't have the specialized amount and took it in sort of ad libitum. But what it hinted at was beyond that 5-hour period. Hydration, sodium intake might affect blood plasma volume more. Total sodium loss or net sodium loss was higher in the group that didn't obviously take in as much, despite the kidneys conserving that through urine output. So, as you said, maybe for a 70.3, you can fake it. Maybe the importance of even, and I say this, like we still place a lot of importance on understanding hydration requirements for that because, for some athletes, it will take more than 5 hours. I think the average for a 70.3 is 6.5 hours. That's
Yeah,
based on the Ironman data. So the average age grouper does need to pay attention to their sodium and to their fluid intake, even for a 70.3. Now, for the faster athletes, maybe it's not as important, even though they're the ones who probably pay way more attention to it. But as you say, if you get into the Ironman, now you're at that distance where probably fluid intake from a total body fluid status is going to be important. Sodium intake potentially influencing plasma volume, and then total carbohydrate intake. You get all those wrong, that's a very long day.
Yeah, I had one of those in Cozumel, buddy.
Oh, okay. I didn't actually see your result. Did you
Oh,
not?
I came off the bike in I think 10th or something like that, and it was going fine, like even the first 9 mile or 15K of the run. And then I don't know if it was gastrointestinal or not, because I wasn't like I was burping up here and there, but I didn't have any GI issues. I took in heaps of water and heaps of calories on the bike. It was a lot. And then after that 15K mark, it was like right on the inside of my iliacus, like right in the lower abdominal, almost kidney area. Every time I would start to run about 15 to 20 steps, I would get a knife stabbing, debilitating lower abdominal pain. I was like, is this like an appendix like thing? Because I couldn't figure out if it was gut related. It was weird.
I would say most likely gut related, lower abdominal.
Yeah.
Again, you'd have to look at how much fluid you took in on the bike. What is your sort of known average sweat rate at that intensity in that heat? Did you overconsume fluid? Did you underconsume? Did you overconsume sodium? Did you underconsume? Did you take in a lot of sodium?
No, I think I had 900 mil per each bottle on the bike. I went through 3 of those bottles. They were each
900 ml of fluid.
No, they were about a liter of fluid per bottle,
fluid.
and 900 milligrams of sodium
900
per bottle.
sodium.
And then I took in, a bunch of flow gel. I think it was like 200 and something grams of flow gel. So I did like roughly 120 grams an hour, and it wasn't terribly hot. And I was drinking plenty of fresh water. And I did also, and I've been doing this for a while, and maybe this is what did or didn't do it. I take like a bit of an Ensure protein drink halfway through the bike, before the halfway. And I do this for half distances too, and it's always been great.
Why do you take the protein in out of interest?
It was weird. For like 10 years, I would get off the bike and I would have like exercise-induced hypoglycemia in like the first 3 to 5K, guaranteed. I'd try doing it while taking a gel in T1, not drinking anything 20 minutes out, taking a gel within 2-3K. And it was like, once I started, I was like, maybe I need some more protein in my system or something to kind of, or some fats to help balance out my blood sugars. And so I did that, and it's never happened since. And to the day, it's never happened. But I've also like done runs off the bike. All my training runs, I never have a problem, and I don't take an Ensure off training runs. So it's only race related for some reason. It's really been fuzzy for me.
So I think you answered your own question there. Like you need to be practicing that Ensure in training.
Well, I mean, I did before, but then ever since it's worked in races, I kind of haven't brought it back into
training. But I would
continue.
If it's part of your race day plan, you need to be practicing that because, how many big bricks did you do, like a 3 or 4 hour brick with 120 grams an hour of carbs plus 900 milligrams of sodium plus a liter of fluid per hour in that temperature, plus taking in an Ensure at the back end of that in terms of timing, then doing a brick run where you're running for, say, 90 minutes and taking in carbs on that and trying to manage your fluid. How did that feel in training? Oh, actually, I've never done that, but I expect to do it. But I expect to do it in a race. You know,
we probably got like 60% there, but no, we did not quite like hammer. I think I did take an Ensure a couple of times during the year, but it wasn't to the extent of what you just said. It was maybe a half version of that. So exactly.
So like maybe just build that in for future and start to, again, that SAID principle, isn't it? Specific adaptation to implied demand.
And secondly,
you've got to be thinking about that.
Secondly, I thought it could have been that it was just too much fructose, and it was just kind of like gestating in the lower gut. Because I have been always running for like 2 or 3 years a fructose heavy mixture. So I was like, maybe it was just too much fructose on the day, and it just got super gassy in there. It stuck.
Yeah, I mean, the fructose is interesting. Obviously, there's probably no limit to the amount of fructose that can be transported across the intestine. But that fructose as well can, now it accelerates gastric emptying. And then it also changes where water is distributed into the lower intestine. I think it's the ileum. And so you get these different compartments of water coming into the intestine. And again, if Alan's listening to this, he's probably like, you completely butchered that. But I was reading all his research recently about this, and it's fascinating how, we think about carbohydrates, these carbohydrates as multiple transportable carbs, like glucose, maltodextrin being a branch of glucose, and then fructose, and how differing types of carbohydrates can impact sort of the amounts we can transport across the intestinal membrane to then be absorbed into the muscle and so on. But it also affects the rate of gastric emptying from the stomach. And then it also affects where the water or that level of hydration or fluid is pulled into in terms of the region of the intestine, the small and the large intestine, how it affects water in the gut, and then, how will it impact sort of fluid transfer from in cell to out of cell. So it's like, it's so much more complicated than what how I think about it. And I'm reading this science. I'm like, oh God, I probably shouldn't even read this, because if I start talking about this to an athlete or something, they're going to be like, oh my God. And I guess the point being here is, well, the point here is that it's actually extremely complicated physiologically. The take-home practicality is actually simple. You need to practice what you intend on doing in a race, in training, and making sure that is at the intensity and roughly the durations, or at least a good proportion of the duration that you intend to race at. So that's the simple takeaway, is that all the underlying stuff of why it's happening. We
can narrow that down through training.
But that's probably the expert, like, look, something like you said there, like, okay, someone's doing all that in training and practicing it, but they're like, oh my God, I've got the worst, like, lower GI cramps, or I've always got diarrhea when I do it. And then you go, okay, well, let's look at the products you're using and let's look at your normalized power. And they're like, okay, so I've got a normalized power of 150 watts and I'm taking in 120 grams of carbs, and it's a mixture of glucose and fructose. What do you reckon? And I'm like, well, firstly, let's just have glucose only at 50 grams an hour and see if you get GI distress. Why is that? Well, because your energy expenditure doesn't require anything else. They go on to glucose only and they're like, oh my God, I feel great. But they're not eating all the other products. Like, those products, they're fantastic products for when you need multiple transportable carbs, glucose, fructose, or maltodextrin with fructose, in order to hit those high numbers of carbs. But if you're an athlete not producing huge amounts of power, and it doesn't have to be huge amounts, at least, look, for a female, probably somewhere around the 160, 170 watts on the bike for 2 to 3 hours. For the male, 210, 220, you're probably going to benefit from up to 90 grams an hour. Anything below that, you're probably starting to look at, 60, maybe 70 grams, maybe lower, and then starting to think, okay, can I do this just with maltodextrin? Maltodextrin is a chain of glucose, so it does require some digestion. Glucose on its own requires no digestion.
Yeah, straight in.
And so you might just go, oh, I've never had just 40 or 50 grams an hour of glucose. You start that and you're like, oh my God, I feel heaps better. Now, the advantage of maltodextrin is there's no sweetness.
Yeah.
Whereas glucose is sweet. And that's where, you'll find that gets a bit harder. So you might just go 40 or 50 grams of maltodextrin. Maltodextrin you can buy from, you buy from a health food
anywhere,
store, a cooking store, if you're worried about that. And it's going to cost you $20 for a couple of kilos. Like, starting off again for some of these athletes, like, price sensitivity, it can be there. And I would say, look, that's potentially a starting point for you if you are getting a lot of GI complaints because you're trying to ram in 120 grams an hour.
Yeah,
maybe
but that's our fault.
It.
As an industry, that is our fault. We have been inundating every article that I see on triathlete.com or all these articles. Oh, this athlete.
I probably wrote most of them.
Yeah. Scott Tindal said everyone's taking 140 grams an hour in Ironman World Championship. So, like, and you didn't say that, but I think that we have made it seem so alluring to just be not only cramming the numbers and the power and the watts, but the calories. Like it's like oh yeah, I'm taking 180 grams of carbs per hour, bud. Where are you at?
And it's a bit of a pissing contest now, isn't it? How many grams of carbs do you consume and how many milligrams of sodium? And look, I think it's had a lot of benefit in that now we're talking about taking in fuel in a session where previously it was like, hey, I did a 3 hour zone 3 and I didn't have anything. I had 50 mils of water. How'd you do? And like there used to be that sort of badge of honor and, around how little you took in. I think now we've gone, okay, there's an awareness you need to take in fuel for sessions, whether it's even zone 2, you just take in less carbs, maybe a combination of protein and fat and whole food forms. Or if it's zone 3 or above, yes, you're taking in more carbs, but it should be specific to what you are as an athlete, not just, hey, the science says we can take in 120 grams an hour and utilize it, and that improves performance based on when you read the subjects in the studies, elite cyclists or elite triathlons with a VO2 max of 65 or something like that. Like, again, is the population being studied? Is it applicable to you when you are reading that study and not just the abstract?
Well, I guess that's true in all advertising. Neither much of it is ever really applicable to me, but it's like the most beautiful version of me if I was the most richest person ever.
Exactly. I've seen that ad of you. What was that? What was that? What was that product that never got released that you were on? You
Oh yeah, it was this this bar that Sun Warrior was going to be created.
Exactly. It was so good. I mean, I wanted to buy one looking at you with that. I was like,
oh man, it was such a bummer. I have to release that one day, like without them knowing. Maybe we'll get like a release.
I definitely think you should get a release and put it up on your Instagram. It would blow up.
So going into a transition right here with us, the holiday season is upon us. We're all starting to think about next year and all the food and subjugation to copious amounts of peer pressure to eat and drink our faces off with our friends and family. How is that affecting your job? Like, are you getting crazy requests about, well, what should I do? Should I not have a beer? How much is too much? Or like, the ecosystem that we create for ourselves this time of year, what should we be most mindful of? And, would you suggest on like a human level to get through the season without, being so strict, but also enjoying yourself?
It's such an interesting question. I mean, you don't want to socially restrict yourself because I think that's a big part of the festive season, isn't it? Being around friends and family. I think though, pressure to drink, and I had this conversation actually with, he's one of my older ones. I think he's 76. I hope I haven't got that wrong, but he was like commenting, he said, man, there is a change. He's like, there's just not that expectation to drink like a whole bottle of wine at a dinner anymore, even a corporate lunch or a dinner. And he's like, now I'll just have a little taste. And everyone's like, oh, we'll have what he's having. And so I think that the social pressure of drinking has certainly dropped off. I think the stigma around that, like I can, hand on heart, like 5 years ago, even like if you weren't drinking, people were like, what's wrong with you? Whereas now it's like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, they respect your opinion and your viewpoint. And so I think that's much easier. So don't feel the pressure. I think the acceptance of non-alcoholic beverages is fantastic. I'm a big fan. Like, I mean, I drink non-alcoholic beers, like soft drink. I just enjoy a beer, and I just, I'll have non-alcoholic beers. They're great. You feel like you're drinking a beer. Most of them are pretty good now. We certainly have great ones in Australia. I know you've got some good ones, Athletic Brewing and whatnot in America.
The problem in America is we just got these things like in the last 3 years. We haven't really had them hit mainstream shelves or even at restaurant availability. Like when I was in Europe 10 years ago, training with the fellas out there, every time we pull over at a gas station, they would be drinking an Erdinger. Those have been around forever.
The Erdinger non-alcoholic is fantastic. I mean, it tastes like a real beer. I mean, and actually you say that I was in New York and LA recently and in San Fran just went after Kona, and everywhere I went, I was like, can I get a non-alcoholic beer? And they're like, oh, sorry, we don't have that. Or they'd have Heineken Zero, which, oh man, it's not the best.
It's a bit of a piss.
Yeah. You said it, not me. But I think now they're getting so much better that it's easy to drink those. And it's, put it in a glass. If you're really worried, put it in a glass. Everyone thinks you're drinking a beer. Great.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably around the alcohol and managing that. If you are going to drink alcohol, probably opt for clear spirits. Have tequila neat. You don't shoot it, obviously, but just sip on it. A good quality, tequila is actually delicious. It's not El Toro, you're talking Casamigos or Patron or something. You can sip on that all day over a piece of ice, and it's nice. Avoid, your dark spirits, and then obviously your mixes. If you're mixing sort of rum with a
Sugar,
ginger beer, you're sort of, you're doubling up. You're probably amplifying the effect of the alcohol, and then obviously the extra calories. So it's just little things around that you can be mindful of. I think if you are going to visit family and friends, or on the day you're going for a meal, take a couple of dishes that serve your purpose. If you are like, if, for example, if I'm talking to a Fuelin athlete and they're like, I mean, obviously we give them green on Christmas Day because it's like, yeah, okay, you're going to do that. But yeah, not every meal might be green. It might be lunch or it might be dinner. But if your lunch was, say, red, take a few salads with you that you love, that hopefully everyone who you're going to visit will enjoy as well. Double down on those salads. Take a source of protein, or at least know what's going to be served. So if it's going to be turkey, just double down on the turkey. Or if you want to take a nice big piece of salmon, or, pork shoulder, or whatever it is, take that and eat it. And then you're not having to complain. You don't,
let me
you're
just tell you
serving the
something real
purpose.
quick, Scott. I'm gonna cut you off real fast. Have you ever personally gone to a stranger's home and brought some super healthy, amazing meal, and meanwhile these people are just meat and potatoes, that's it, and you offer it to everyone and everyone seems real excited, and then you're looking around and no one's eating a single damn piece of
I'm not saying you have to push it on anyone. You just put it in the middle, but
and
you
you're
eat
just
it.
the weird, oh, that's just the weird healthy guy. Like, I've done that in my wife's family. I made some beautiful butternut squash soup. I had a charcuterie board I spent a lot of money creating, and they didn't touch it, and I was so offended.
Obviously,
Like,
before attending, speak to the host, speak to your mother-in-law, find out the vibe, find out what's being served, and do it that
I had
way.
to make a statement. I didn't care if they ate it, Scott. That was the
Well, there you
truth.
go. See, and that's the reality. You just didn't care.
All right. So yes, making
So
your own dish.
and then look, again, this comes to like, what did I call it? Mindfulness, indulgent mindfulness.
Ooh,
So
is that your book title?
I like it, but this is around the Christmas period. So if you like want to eat a pizza, make your pizza. So like, I mean, we make it every Monday. We have Pizza Monday in our house. Like we make pizza dough either the day before or in the morning. Making pizza dough, if you've got a KitchenAid, literally takes you about 5 minutes, and it's perfect. You use great quality double O flour. You get some yeast, blah, blah, blah. It's all done.
How long are you proofing your dough, bud?
When you say proofing your dough, do you mean like
Yeah,
letting it sit?
yeah. How let it rise?
Oh, we let it rise for at least minimum 3 hours.
There
So
you go.
minimum, we
So
go
it takes
3 hours at least. But you
takes
make it
five
in the
minutes.
morning. It's 5 minutes to make, but it's like slow cooking, isn't it?
I
Slow
know.
cooking takes 5 minutes to prep, 8 hours to cook. But
Absolutely.
you've still got all this stuff afterwards. So, like this mindful, what did I say? Mindfulness, indulgence, or
Mindful
indulgence,
indulgence.
indulgence, yeah, mindfulness. And then make your own pizzas at home. Now, even if you buy a good quality base, and then you put your own toppings on, okay, you're indulging, but you've got a little bit of insight into what goes into that pizza. And that's going to help you control a little bit of what you're eating. Same, if you want to have a dessert, make a tiramisu and be aware of what goes into it. And then you may not have half a tiramisu, half the portion of tiramisu. You might actually even just have a scoop. So little
I'm
things
just
like that.
I'm just in awe because I feel we are so the same. I think I've told, like, 10 years ago, I've been telling people, like, I don't care how much sweets you eat, as long as you make them yourself. Just make them yourself. And I'm not going
Yeah.
to tell you that, oh, that piece of cake is bad or good. I mean, I'm not trying to give like dietary advice too much, but when I get asked those questions, that's my exact answer, man. I love it.
I mean, I eat a lot of sweets. I eat a lot of chocolate. It's definitely my downfall. I was talking about like Lindt chocolate balls. I remember when I looked
Oh,
at Lindt chocolate balls have 80 calories per ball. I
that's
could
nothing.
I can eat more. Yeah, it is when you eat 10 to 12 of them and you just pack in 1,000 calories watching like
Which
one
flavor?
episode of House MD, just the milk chocolate.
You don't
It
get the
just
variety? Get
Oh,
the
the variety
variety,
pack's
man.
good as
Treat
well. Yeah, the
yourself.
variety pack's good. So, look, you have all those sorts of things going on. So, look, I mean, I think the mindfulness around indulgence, that's a great one. Thinking about maybe just serving the purpose for yourself. Think about taking dishes that help maybe you and others, the non-alcoholic beverage. And then I think above all is just being mindful of portions. Eat
Mhm.
slowly, eat
Yeah.
slowly, put your fork down in between mouthfuls, finish your mouthful, have a chat, drink lots of water in between, eat slowly. And just if you can eat slowly, your portions will take under control because your mind will actually register what you've consumed. You will feel full, but if you go back within 15 minutes, you go back for seconds, you're probably, you're just overindulging. So, yeah, it probably sounds like very restrictive, but there's
I
simple
don't know.
steps that can just make a huge difference. And you can still eat everything that's put in front of you. Just eat slowly and just be mindful of the portions you're doing. You don't have to fill your plate so it looks like,
Yeah.
you're never going to eat again in your life.
I feel like you just don't have to punish it so hard. Like you just
Well,
take
you
it
think
light.
about it afterwards, eh? Like after Christmas lunch, like you go into the food coma and everyone's lying on the couches. I mean, in Australia, we all sit there on Boxing Day watching the cricket because the cricket's on. It goes forever. It goes for 5 days. You think baseball goes for a long time.
I've
Test match
seen
cricket goes for
I've
5 days.
I
But
saw a
we'll
meme
just
on
sit,
that.
yeah, we'll just sit around watching because we're all in food comas for so long. But yeah, anyway, look, Christmas and the festive period and the holidays, it is all about being
Mm.
with family and friends. And you don't want to be that person who is obviously perceived as, that health nut and whatnot. Just be quiet about it. Just go about your business. Just do it. You don't have to preach. You don't have to, say, hey, you don't have this, don't have that. You're like,
You
oh,
don't have
damn.
to announce you're gluten free and that you've been
Exactly.
feeling great. Oh,
Yeah, exactly. So uh, simple steps, man.
okay. So that all makes sense. Now, what I've also done before is also like get up and go run for like an hour. And then I feel like, oh, I'm going to be hungry. But then my appetite actually is a little bit less savage because like my body just feels better. So I think that, and also I think most people want to have that box checked. And then I think if you feel good about what you're eating, then you don't really put on the weight. So like if you feel good because you ran and it was like whatever, like you're okay. You ran 90 minutes.
And I think that's a really good point. Like how often during the day before Christmas and the day after Christmas, you just don't do anything. Even if it's going for a walk with your family or your loved one or something, just do something physical. Go for a swim, go for a run, go for a bike ride, whatever it is. Get out and play ball in the park. Just something physical. It makes a big difference, I think, to how you sort of just you feel and your mood and everything like that.
Absolutely. Great advice. We didn't even get to hit on a couple of the other topics. I didn't realize we had gone so long already. My gosh. I just get
No,
just zoned in on this awesome chat we get to have. But before
that's
you do
good.
go,
Yeah.
Fuelin, I heard there's some app updates coming soon. We can expect some beauty from, I mean, it's already great, but some gems.
So we've got the soft launch happening pretty soon, hopefully in the next week or so, and athletes will start seeing potentially a new app. We'll then start rolling that out to existing customers, which is very exciting because a whole new sort of interface and I mean, similar structure in terms of, the red, yellow, green and everything like that. Just improved functionality, I guess, is the best way of thinking about it from what an athlete will see from our perspective, much better data aggregation, and we'll be able to start showing back a lot more data to the user, which I think will be fascinating around like how they've gone throughout their periods of time with tracking and performance and things like that. Android app's going to launch, I think, in January.
I wasn't even going to bring it up. I wanted to leave on a good note. So that's great news.
There you go. So Android will be coming, which means obviously a big push into Europe with Yarn and
Nice.
another. We've got another big announcement in terms of someone who has invested into the company, which is very exciting.
It's probably
Um,
Johnny or Alistair Brownlee because he's investing in Race Ranger suddenly. So it's got to be him. I know it.
well, we'll see. Hey? Um, So yeah, that's exciting. Alan and myself and Megan have been updating the algorithm behind. So we're looking at bringing in a lot more data points, things like FTP, CSS, critical swim speed, personas around the athlete, which I think will assist everything we talked about today. Like, so you can either be a professional, an elite, an age grouper, or like a weekend warrior, sort of amateur. And that will have a direct impact on things like default settings around caloric expenditure or predictions. So I think that's going to be really cool. We had, can I say it? Yeah, we had a very cool conversation with a company that provides good insights into under the hood, shall I
It's probably
say.
Aura or Whoop or
No,
something.
no.
I mean,
Well, we'll just
I mean,
we'll
I
just
don't know.
leave it. We'll just leave it as under the hood.
Okay.
So you start to get a better understanding of who you are, and that's going to hopefully become part of the
23 and
fueling.
me. Gut
It'll
stuff.
become part of the Fuelin ecosystem. No, we base ourselves on science. Um,
Thank you.
well, 23andMe is definitely science. That's DNA. But yeah, that will hopefully become part of the ecosystem of Fuelin, which I think will be a huge membership benefit.
Yeah.
We are getting involved in a protein company. I'll leave that loose as well.
It's got to be
Again,
raw.
and no, they're not protein. They're more carbohydrates.
Oh, damn
But
it.
this company, again, you'll get added benefit, bonus is just being part of in the Fueling ecosystem. So a lot of value there, which I think it just keeps, in the end, what we want is Fueling just becomes a no-brainer where you're like, well, I just got to have it every year because I use it on and off. I've got 2 races and I just need to prepare for those. And when I don't need it, okay, it just sits there or I just am loose with it, but it's got other benefits that are more related to maybe health. So now you start having your health, it's like your health passport, I guess, in that sense. And that's
Yeah.
where I think that's where we're going to go with it. But that's what I see as the vision. This becomes like just where your data is stored, and we start to become that central hub. Maybe it is things like Aura or Whoop and things like Inside Tracker and all these other things, and
Inside
nutrition
tracker, you say?
nutrition becomes central hub to your training. So you're linked to Training Peaks, to TriDot, RunDot, to Final Search. We've just
Wow.
done an integration to Humango,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is really cool.
I got
Yeah,
to test
so
that out. Oh, yeah. Franco told me some big updates were coming.
yeah. So the Humango integration, we're in beta testing with that. We've done the integration with Garmin, which is really cool. So we're direct
Yeah.
integration with Garmin now. So if you don't use one of those platforms and just want to create a training calendar and fuel in, and you have a Garmin watch, it all syncs up exactly the same. So that's pretty cool. So it's all sort of moving and shaking. We're pretty excited about it all.
I've got a good feature that I'd love to see, and then
Mate,
I'll
tell
let you
me.
go.
Yeah, tell me.
When can you hack into my camera and then I can just eat in front of the camera and it's just telling me exactly what I've just done to myself. And
So
it's not
yeah.
even, I can't turn it off either. It's always on.
That's actually so not even, so we're looking at the photographic, taking a photo of food and how accurate that is. It's just not there yet. So we're not
No,
keen to
of
bring it
course
out.
not.
Like, I mean, I know some other companies, nutrition companies are like, oh, you can take a photo and it logs it. And we're like, cool, but it's completely inaccurate. So we're not going to go there yet. We sort of, let's be a little bit more reliable. But I love that idea of just your
Yeah.
camera always being on. But you're not always holding your phone in front of your face.
No,
Oh,
but it's like
actually, you say that. Think of how many people are reading stuff and they're reading something and they're just eating as they're
my
mindlessly,
kid can't unload the dishwasher without turning off his phone. So I'm sure that those kids are just nonstop.
I love it. The other really cool thing, apart from obviously working with the RTS squad, which we're pumped about for next year and this year, but we're working with USAT with Project Podium with Parker
Oh
Spence.
yeah, Parker. Oh, that's
Yeah, he's a
amazing.
legend, and
Yeah.
all those young kids who are vying for LA, where
They need
we've
it.
we've started the project. The kids are the young men are all on the program, and they're starting to get dialed in.
You've been talking to
Unfortunately,
Reese yet?
yeah.
Oh yeah,
We're all
Reese.
on, and look, and as you say, like even the best kids with the best help can have adverse impact. Just things related to fueling and not understanding it. So I think anything we can do to support them And it probably breaks me that I did have a chat with with Triathlon Australia the other day. I was like, we are helping, as an Australian, I'm helping the USA hopefully achieve gold in LA. I said it does sort of wind me up a little bit, but hey, if you guys don't want it, then so
Hey,
anyway,
you guys,
see.
you'll always have breakdancing. Don't worry.
There's lawsuits and everything about musicals with that. So
Oh
anyway,
yeah, thanks.
but I think next time we do this, depending if anyone actually wants to hear us talk again, we'll definitely cover bugbears around nutrition that really grate me at the moment. And I think supplements is always an interesting one. We can maybe knock that off in 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah, I think these episodes always do the best. But anyways, thanks for sticking around, Scott. We love you. We'll have you back again probably after the holidays when I've put on 0 weight because I'm an animal. Thanks, buddy. Talk soon.
Have a great Christmas, mate. Speak to you soon. Bye.